advisory vote. All right. So we had a really excellent meeting with the mayor last week, I think, or the week before, to kind of flesh out some shared topics of interest. So we're hoping this will be a like, quick and effective discussion. To start out with, we wanted to talk about the South Mercer playfields. So we're going to have an update today on that project from Tony and Brandy, and it sounds like it's going quite well. Yeah.
Yeah. So we just start by kind of reminding all of us that we didn't decide to do this project until late March of this year, which was really challenging. Can you pull up that first picture in the agenda? But we are on schedule and things are going well. Things are turning green. I wore my green shirt in honor of the field project today. And we just, I just have to say we've had such a good partnership with the city. Jason and Elaine have been amazing to work with, incredibly responsive. We meet every other week. We talk about the field and a lot of other things between the city and the school district. So it's going really, really well. There's a note in the agenda that total project cost is pre-tax about $5.75 million. The city kicked in $7.5 million to do turf infields on fields 1 and 2. So those are the 2 west fields.
750,000, not 7.
Sorry, 750,000.
That'd be great.
So you can see in the photo here that those 2 west fields get new infill, a rubberized pad underneath, and then a cork infill. And then the field on the east is the improved softball field. So do you want to talk about our progress?
Yeah, progress has been coming along really smooth. Right now we are able to shift gears between rainy day projects and non-rainy projects because we're sowing and we're also stitching or gluing in the infield line, so we're able to shift gears as the weather shifts on us. So we've been able to continue with progress. What you see here is current as of yesterday. We are working on final grading on that area by field 3, which is in the top of the picture there. Started on that today, and hopefully by next week we'll be moving into that area. All in all, the weather hasn't impacted our schedule. We've been shooting for the end of the calendar year for completion. So we're still on track for that. Like I said, right now we haven't had to make any major adjustments to that. So things are going great, and as Brandy said, we've had a great working relationship with Elaine and Jason through this whole project, and their crews have been really helpful, chasing down irrigation things, lighting circuits, things like that. So it's been a great partnership.
What you see in this picture is the large multi-purpose field, has all of the lines in it. So that's lined for football, for regulation soccer, and then also lacrosse. And if you go to that next picture, it's kind of a messy picture, but it's the reality of what's happening out there. So all of those red lines for lacrosse have to be done on site. The white lines are actually woven into the turf at the factory. So on the dry days, they're working on all the inlays, and then when it rains, they can sow turf and lay turf and do grading.
There's also some, I don't think we can see them on these pictures, but there's also some tick marks, we call them. So it's not just the yellow lines being a full-size 18 adult-size soccer field, but we also have 18 unders, 12 and under, and I believe 6 and under tick marks, so we can also add those lines in as well. And there'll be obviously a lot more of those fields within that space. So what we're doing here will actually be the equivalent of what we were doing using the other 2 outfields. So we've actually increased the amount of space that we'll have available for us.
And we worked really closely with Elaine on multiple meetings to get all of these, the older kids actually have lines, and then as we go younger, we do tick marks and cones, and so there's just a lot of kids on this field on a Saturday morning. And then can you go to the next picture? This is just a fun and pretty picture, but this is the parking lot, and this is part of why we aren't using the playground or parking the Lake Ridge kids here. So that's all the infill.
Well,
it's half of the infill that will go into this field. So the white bags that you see out there are sand, And then the black bags are the coated rubber. And then somewhere tucked back in there are the cork. So,
I don't know what you've been hearing on the city side, but we have heard from the school there and from some local residents that the impact on traffic hasn't been as bad as they expected. Like, for sure, the school's gonna be really happy to get that lower parking lot back, for drop-offs and pickups and so forth, but, I don't know if you've heard any complaints about the traffic around there.
I think Heidi did a nice job of getting
Yeah.
a plan in place and
Yeah.
executing it. No. Any questions or?
I don't know if you've heard from
I'm
Yep.
very excited, a lot of excitement.
Yeah, good.
And we're excited about this project, both as a way of bringing kind of parity to some of our programs at the high school, but also just that it's something the whole community can enjoy, you know? Well spent. Okay.
And thanks to the city for the contributions, everything, yeah.
So that 750 million would have been nice.
Growing.
Yeah.
Love this game.
Okay, no other questions about that? Okay,
Director Tucker, do you want to do introductions real fast?
Oh.
We jumped right into it.
I was all bit. Yeah, sure, let's do introductions. I'll start. I'm Maggie Ty Tucker. I am in my third year of serving on the school board, and I'm the current soon-to-be outgoing president.
I'm David D'Souza, 7 years on the school board.
I'm Asha Warner. I'm the junior student school board rep.
I'm Andrew House, and I'm the senior school board representative.
Fred Rundle, superintendent.
Erin Badgley, Executive Director of Compliance, Legal Affairs, and Human Resources for the district.
Ted Weinberg, City Council.
Jesse Vaughn, city manager.
Andrea Larson, City Clerk.
Ed Holmes, the Police Chief.
Andrew Johnson, Technology Director.
Tony Coon, Maintenance and Operations Director.
Brandy Fox, owner's rep for the school district for the last 28 years.
Dave Rosemont, I'm Deputy Mayor.
Celine Hayes, I'm your mayor.
Dan Lowick, school board.
And Deborah Lurie, school board.
Online, we've got Lisa. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Lisa Andrew. I'm in my 4th year on city council.
Jake Jacob, city council.
Okay, and I don't know if you can talk or both. This is Wendy Waker. Another councilor.
Stuck in traffic. Sorry, had every intention to be there in person. Thank you for
I am sorry for that.
I'm Allie Speeds, Chief of Administration for the city.
Hi, Ellie.
Jason Kinner, Chief of Operations.
Sorry, I don't have a.
Yeah.
That's okay. Okay, great. Thank you. David?
Sure, let's move on to the facility master plan, the long-range facility master plan. We started this in 2019 about thinking about how do we evolve about $700 million worth of facilities when you think about the schools and the land and things like that it's on, and how do we maintain this. We hired Malum architects to help us with this. We knew we needed experts to help us with this, to get a plan in place, to bring along the community, bring along board members, bring along staff as to how we will be rebuilding, remodeling, and maintaining our facilities. So Malum has helped helped architect our schools around here when we did the last bond. And so they were the natural group to bring in. I mean, this does cost money, but when you think about the outlay we'd be putting in to rebuild these schools, you have to be thoughtful and planful, and you can't be cheap on hiring these experts to come in. So so they came in and helped us build a plan. It took I think about 8 months. Just before the pandemic, we had the community staff. I think it was about 30 to 50 people involved in building a plan. That plan then has been put onto our website, and it helps us understand the order in which we would rebuild our schools. For example, completing the middle school was next in line, then rebuilding Island Park, and then the other elementary schools, as well as some fix-ups to the high school and the administration building. So that was the general sense of the plan. the pandemic hit us before we could go out to the community and really talk about it in a broad way. In some ways, that was okay, because over the last 2 years, things have changed due to the pandemic. And so we are spending the next set of weeks and months to revisit this plan and update it to new situations, for example, around enrollment, quite frankly, and thinking about how Mercer Island as a whole will change as a result of light rail and other decisions city council will make, and birth rates and demographer studies and things like that. So that's generally the nature of our plan. Update will be coming. Our first offsite is tomorrow, in fact, in this room, with the architects and to help us update it. Once we get this update, we will be going back out to the community to kind of share where we are and what we think needs to happen. So that's roughly what we have. If there's any questions or any thoughts around this? I know the city wants to do something similar, and I think our feedback would be very much to get experts to help along with this. I mean, Malum Architects were very competent for us. They've done schools. I wouldn't necessarily suggest them for the city, but I know they've done schools. They did help us bring the community along. They kept us focused. Obviously, we had to be at a high enough level when we talk about this to be able to make good decisions that allow us to both think about a future bond as well as spend our capital and tech project levy money efficiently. And they were not so low that we were picking color of carpets and thinking about programs in the schools at this point in time. It's kind of too early for that. David?
Yeah, this might be cart before the horse a little bit here, but is there like do you have sort of a point in mind where you have to commit to a long-term strategy in terms of, prioritizing school renovations, reuse based on, I mean, like, at some point you have to say, like, this is our best guess for enrollment, and then that dictates what we want to do here, here, and here. Is that point, are we talking like this year, next year, like what are we?
It's a great question. We're always committed to a plan, actually. We picked the order in which we would rebuild these schools, and this most recent levy we paused for capital projects actually allowed us to focus on schools that wouldn't be updated longer term out, so keep those maintained. And maybe a little bit less maintenance on schools that we plan on updating sooner. You wouldn't necessarily go out for a 50-year roof on a school you plan on rebuilding sooner. So we already committed to the plan in some ways for that, but we've certainly got a bond that is going to be expiring in 2028 and 2029 that we'd like to renew just to keep tax rates consistent. And that would be a great time for us to think about a good rebuild of our middle schools, certainly first. We're going to learn about bond prices and inflation costs and things like that, which helps us identify the scope. Maybe 2 years ago, we were thinking we could finish the middle school and build an elementary school like we did last time. Maybe price-wise, that's out of scope.
David, you said rebuild our middle schools. You mean our elementary schools?
Sorry, yes.
Finish the middle.
Finish the middle school, rebuild an elementary school. But that might be out of scope depending on cost. So again, things we have to look at.
But I think what's important is that this is a living document that we look at every year. And we, 2 years of it, we have not decided any timelines and haven't made any decisions. So what we're going to be talking about tomorrow is, because we wrapped it up right when COVID was starting, and we weren't able, even though we had a huge number of community members involved in the process, we never had the opportunity to take it out to the community.
Yeah.
And then since then, things have changed so much that we thought it was better for the board to get together to kind of resituate, figure out, okay, we're in a different position than we were 3 years ago with enrollment, with fund balance, with all that. But it is still really helpful, and we'll, every year, regardless of what we do this year in terms of updating it, that we're gonna continue to do that and then make our decisions with facilities accordingly. I mean, David's much more conservative than I am. I say the sooner the better in terms of the middle school, so, we've got a lot to talk about, and, I mean, I'd rather redo, well, we ended up replacing a roof that we didn't want to replace, but because things got bumped out, it couldn't wait any longer. So it's things like that, it's maintenance costs, so, West Mercer and Lake Ridge are in better condition than Island Park, so those are higher on the list for capital improvements and lower on the list for replacement.
Yeah.
So but it's always moving and changing, and that's why we wanted to get this long-range master plan in gear, especially from the bond defeat, 2008, 2010, 12.
The last one?
Not the last one, but the one that failed. Make sure that we're bringing the community along with the decisions.
Yeah.
That we're making the decisions as a community so that nothing is a surprise, which I think led to that failure.
Thanks.
And that's one of the value of having the experts, is we have the time and people to evaluate all solutions along the way.
And we're planning on actually hiring 2 demographers, like the demographer, I believe that the demographer that we've worked with historically, so that we can have like a continuous kind of set of data there, but also bringing in another demographer as for like a second opinion, because those projections are so critical to planning for schools and programming and staffing and everything. So that data, once we have it back, those reports, once we have them back, which should be like January, February, do you think?
Yeah, they're saying, Matt will tell us for sure tomorrow, but
Yeah.
somewhere between 8 to 12 weeks.
8 to 12 weeks, okay, but once we have that, certainly, like, I'm sure that might be of use to the city and so.
We're not experts in that realm, but we do a lot of capital projects, and we can tell you in this region, when it's booming, you don't want to be building.
Right.
And you are in very advantageous economic times to be thinking about going into a recession, being in a recession, and having a lot of resources in the region that need work. And, we saw that first school bond fail, and then we saw what do we get for $1 the next time it went out, and it was a lot less than we could have got the first time out. It's really is good to talk to the community about the timing of your purchase, not only, the overlap with an existing bond, just value-wise. You do get a lot of value when your block and timing come together.
Where is the city at in terms of the planning process, kind of starting to think about the planning process?
For our capital
Yeah.
facilities, I'll let Jesse Bond take that.
Thank you, good evening again. Good segue, I think the city is right in the hunt there, starting our own facilities assessment. Just to put a cherry on top, City Hall hasn't had heat since Monday.
Yes.
So hopefully that will be prepared by this
We
week.
still had our council meeting though, she made us, about a half hour before we're supposed to be there, so.
Yeah, we had parkas and blankets on Tuesday night, but we got the meeting done. We will be kicking off our facilities assessment with consultant selection end of this year, Q1, and then probably spending, I anticipate, the next 2 years, looking at the buildings we have, discussing repair, replace, looking at the properties we have, and really, the end goal is a long-term facilities plan. As you know, you've been in City Hall. We have to look at City Hall. The maintenance facility and yard behind City Hall are also aging and have a number of problems. There's another building behind the community center. We call it the Annex. It's about the same vintage and has about the same list of problems. We also have a facility at Luther Burbank Park, the Luther Burbank Admin Building. And it has historical significance, but we'll be looking at the operational efficiencies of continuing to use that building. A lot has changed for us. We work differently than we did a couple years ago. So that's part of our mission is what space do we actually need? Where should it be located? And how might we partner? Which is a good segue because I have had a couple just brainstorming sessions with Superintendent Rundle about these opportunities to perhaps co-locate, start some visioning around things like fleet. We have a large fleet at the city. You have a fairly large fleet as well. how might we think about, doing this together, looking at our facilities. So right now, that's just a vision comment, but we'll plant a seed that we'd like to invite you to be part of that process with us as well. So Mayor, I'll turn it back to you. You may have some additional comments to make.
Well, I think we had a good meeting, and I think we talked about a lot of visions that could happen as we go into an uncertain kind of electric future, and obviously understanding the infrastructure challenges around that. I think more down to earth, when we think about our facilities, that we have not only our buildings and where we house our folks, but our capital facilities and our transportation facilities. We had some great discussions about Island Crest Way and how that intersects with your Island Crest facility. We put a lot of energy, resources, time into the safety corridor analysis along Island Crest Way. City staff have done a number of really small but quick projects to include signage, visibility, crosswalks. We're talking about crosswalks and putting pedestrian lights at Island Crest Way and Island Park Elementary, potential roundabout down at the south end at Sunnybeam to facilitate some of the queuing and the levels of service that are happening up there. So we're constantly kind of thinking about what can we do to increase safety, plan for the future. We've got a lot of electric bikes, electric scooters. We have pretty narrow sidewalks through there, and we have vegetation that's encroaching into the sidewalks. So, it's really good to have these types of communications between our, at least on our staff level, so that we're all rowing in the same direction, because it's, our infrastructure always touches yours somewhere, and we want to be a help.
Yeah, and when we get to the point of being ready to rebuild Island Park, that's gonna require a lot of coordination, because I know there's a lot of studies that have been done, and
Yeah.
you guys have a lot of data about how to
And,
do
we
that.
know north-south bicycle facilities could be improved. We'd like to see infrastructure in or around the road deck. We know that the school, where it touches on Crest Way, has queuing with cars. There are issues that we could solve. We have, some pretty horrible intersection level of service right there at 53rd. Folks coming up and I know it's a challenge for your staff directing traffic and trying to move buses through and around there. So we have actually some projects in the TIP to address that, but as we look towards that facility improvement, we have a lot of, we have our eyes on some challenges that could be solved with that queuing and on Crest Way, and try and allow us to improve some of the bike path stuff that comes along.
Yeah, certainly we've got an opportunity to build two-story schools now and expose more land where we could bring traffic and or buses off of Island Crest Way quicker, or allow longer queues onto school property. I mean, there are clearly issues around surface coverage, impervious surface coverage, how many stories can we have, impact onto the neighborhoods. All that has to be thought through as we think about that. Depending on when we build, how do we handle the current set of students while building a new school? Can we move them into existing schools and shut down one school while we rebuild it? Certainly the timing right now, while our enrollment is low, might facilitate that, might allow us to do that kind of more easily. So all those are things we want to think about in the next few months as we make progress on clarifying our plan.
But unfortunately, the costs of moving kids to another school would be like operating costs for us, correct? They would not be.
Yeah, one of the things that Malum is helping us with, and we'll talk more about tomorrow, but just thinking about, if we were to take a school offline to redistribute students, just the cost right now, even for modular classrooms or mobile classrooms or portables, they're running, where are they now, Brandy and Tony? They're
About $1.5 million for a double classroom with site work and associated stuff.
Yeah, so the costs of doing that are prohibitive when we start looking at what's the savings to just open the school versus put in, just 2 classrooms running 1.5 million right now. Those are short and long-term challenges we have to discuss and figure out the best strategy for.
Did you have a question, Jessica?
No.
Okay. It's like an auction, to which,
I think it's great, and, you know, we had city staff on our facilities master plan for these very reasons, to make sure that we were considering all this. I mean, there was just as an example, there was a lot of discussion about moving Island Park School back farther or to the side, or, you know, something like restructuring that whole facility because of the traffic.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
any other questions on our facilities? I did want to say that we are already kind of knowing what the, at least, for now, we're kind of like mentally in our heads, keeping to the set of priorities that were established in our planning process. So for example, you know, like improvements to the high school theater are pretty low on that list in terms of like time priority. And so we did a bunch of upgrades in the spring and summer that we were very carefully done so that they got the improved performance that we needed, but they were mostly things that could be reused if the theater did get rebuilt at some point, you know, so that we're not just sort of like throwing money downhill after, you know, aging facilities. So we have in our heads as we're making decisions, kind of like, and as the staff are making decisions, like what that order of priorities is. So that may shift as we pick it up and kind of look at it again and update it.
That's an interesting statement too, is, you know, Micah kind of fell by the wayside a little bit right now. But what we've noticed is still a need for drama and art and drama and theater. And the request for features and upgrades in our school system has increased as energy on Micah has decreased. So we're seeing a much renewed interest around upgrades, and whether it be work in our middle school or in a future elementary school as well has been coming to the surface. So that will be, you know, I think one way or another, these costs end up in the community anyway, because there's clear need for these type of facilities. I think another thing we'll have to think about too is what the interest is. You know, many things that we have are used completely by the school, and we don't have time or schedule for outside groups to be able to use it. And to what extent do our drama and theater facilities have these same sort of constraints to it, or do we try and repair that or add to that in some way? So we tend to be very school focused and school hour focused, as we found with our tracks and fields and rental off our rooms and things like that. And your feedback would be helpful on that.
Well, I don't think there's any shortage of interest in the community for things like, you know, performing arts and all of the arts. We do what we can with the resources that we have. I haven't heard much from Micah, and certainly through kind of post-pandemic, during the pandemic. It's such a challenge for all the performing arts organizations, what happened in the pandemic, and I think everybody's just trying to claw their way out of the hole that left and get back on their feet. I'm sure that in the future we'll hear more from the arts organizations, and we, you know, as you know, the Arts Council on Mercer Island is very active in supporting the arts, working with K4C, looking for grants, looking for grant opportunities to leverage in the Mercer Island arts community with Milo, the community center. So we keep the mission going, we do what we can, but, you know, we really have to focus on the core things that we have in front of us too, which, you know, right now the city is making a massive once-in-a-lifetime investment in infrastructure, a lot of federal dollars that came out of federal infrastructure programs. A lot of our energy is going into capital projects, capital project management, facility analysis, and what we're going to do over the next 20, 30 years in that regard.
There was a group of arts parents, like band parents, theater parents, that kind of thing, that last spring started kind of kicking around ideas just amongst themselves, but also kind of in public, about whether there might be some way of planning for a future where the theater at the high school could be accessible from the outside without people going through the school, so that it could be in some way like a joint kind of like city school, you know, facility.
us know, we'll fix the zoning to make that happen.
What?
Great.
That's a huge piece.
Yeah, I want to say that.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is transportation, electric fleets and forward planning. So, we had several big discussions last school year about, how the board wanted to move forward on our plans to build an electric fleet, right? Like, did we want to, go all in and, run a transportation levy and ask for the money to go all electric or close to all electric? We'll never be able to go all electric because we need some diesel buses to get our kids to Eastern Washington for sports events and things like that, but nearly all electric right away. But there are that's not necessarily the right way to do it because the technology is improving over time. You don't maybe want to be like the first buyer of a new technology or close to the first buyer of a new technology. And so we have a couple different possible plans in which we do, this percent of the fleet and then this percent and this percent. But what we decided to do is basically to just wait and see what our first 2 electric buses are like, and they were supposed to come this fall, but we have just found out that they are probably not coming until February or March. The buses, the shells are completely done, but there's a supply chain problem with the batteries. So, again, you wouldn't want to be counting on a whole fleet to arrive in time for September and then be told, like, sorry, we can't get the batteries. So, so we're kind of, I think, hanging on to that notion and just waiting to see what the buses are like once they come in February and March. It's not a supply chain problem, it's like a human supply problem, which is there are very, very few people. There are only 2 technicians in Washington State that are qualified to work on these buses, so you can imagine they're already in high demand. And so this is a situation that may improve as the years go on. So that's kind of where we're at right now, but we're all very interested in having a greener school bus fleet for a lot of reasons. I don't think I need to explain it to you all. I know that you've looked at electric vehicles yourselves, but that's kind of where we are with that. And also 2 buses is pretty much what we can handle right now in terms of charging. And so we would have to create more infrastructure to support even half of the fleet.
And just as a reminder on the transportation levy, unlike our other levies, which were approved last February, that's the enrichment programs and operations levy, and then our capital technology levy. The way the transportation levies work for public schools is it's a one-time collection, and then you spend it over the 6 years, but that balances taxes in that year. So the board, to your point, President Tucker, the board talked quite a bit last year about, when you talk about turning over an entire fleet, how long, how many levy cycles should it take to do that to keep tax rates from bouncing around too much. So that's one feature of the transportation levy that makes it a little tricky for us, is trying to gauge that.
But we are now allowed to use transportation levy money for infrastructure like charging stations, which thanks to our state legislators here who pushed that through. So that's a big improvement because previously we would have had to be paying for that out of our operation funds.
So I think we've got roughly 40 buses, big and small, that type of thing. About 400K an electric bus right now. So that's kind of the size, the magnitude that we'd be looking at over time. Clearly, we expect prices of the electric buses to go down over time. Our fleet has an existing lifespan. We're supposed to get about 12 years out of our fleet, so some buses are newer, some buses are older. So you'd like to, in some ways, keep your diesel buses for as long as you can, and then upgrade to electric when the time is right, as technology and all that improve. So yeah, that's kind of an idea of what we're looking at there.
Well, the city council's been working on a climate action plan, and we've done a lot of analysis all the way from the county level down to the city level. And I think the way we look at these types of infrastructure investments and kind of the greening of our impacts in Mercer Island is where to get the most bang for your buck. And We know that in Mercer Island, transportation and housing are the two largest emitters. You guys have done a good job with solar where you can, and, you know, trying to reduce the footprints of your own buildings themselves. But, you know, as you look towards electrification of the fleet, I'm sure that's a huge portion of the greenhouse gas emissions of the district overall. You know, you can continue to green the buildings because you have large roofs and generally have some access to sun. You know, we think about things the same way that you do, that we're gonna look at our fleet, we know that our fleet is a large portion of our emissions, and where we can make the investments, when we can sustain the charging infrastructure, and get the most kind of greenhouse gas emission reductions. Those would probably be where we put our dollars. My hope is that there's enough federal, state, regional dollar matching, granting, subsidies to help accelerate these types of things. You know, the cost of the bus is the market price of $400. You know, you just hope that there's something out there that could be an incentive to bring it down to, you know, a comparable cost of what we pay on a diesel bus, or at least take the residual and what we get out of that and make it as close to neutral for the district as possible. And that would be, you know, the state has pretty aggressive climate goals, the region does as well. We all need to kind of look at these things and make those investments on a broad basis.
When we get into the legislative priorities here in another agenda items, I know Director Glowitz will speak to this, but to your point, Mayor, around, you know, what might be some grants that are out there. There have been some that have come, and our Director of Transportation has been applying for them. We unfortunately, because of our socioeconomic demographic compared to other school districts, have fallen to the bottom of some of those and haven't even qualified for some. So that's an area that is a challenge for us as we're moving forward, but we're definitely looking at some of those for sure. You know, maybe Tony or Brent, you can speak to OSPIs and the state's expectation around our greening of our schools and work that you've already been doing in our schools.
In 2019, the legislature passed the Clean Buildings Act, and because of the size of our buildings, many of them are subject to a prescribed EUI that has to be met by a certain date. High school is the first one that has to meet that. And that'll also be, you know, something that we'll think about in the long-range facilities plan of what buildings are meeting it and what's not, and what will be a priority for that. But they're all big enough that they will trigger that.
Other transportation-related items, we're a long ways away from it yet, but I always just throw out there that once the light rail finally starts operating, it would be wonderful if there was a way that we could all work together to help get teachers and staff from the light rail station to their schools, whether some kind of shuttle bus service or something, because that would be fewer trips on and off the island, fewer single driver trips, etc. So that is quite a ways away.
We hate to update you on other people's projects, so we'll leave that to Sandra.
Leave that to them, yes, absolutely. And then the other transportation-related item is there's been increasing community concern about kids riding electric vehicles, so kids riding electric scooters and electric bicycles, especially around the middle school and the south end. And I know that the district has been kind of working on that issue, and I don't know if Chief Holmes, if you have anything to add to that in terms of like how we can kind of get a message out about like helmet wearing as well as responsible driving, because these things go pretty fast.
I had for the record, I had a conversation with our SRO, Foster Barrett, recently about this and gave him some information on that, so I would imagine he'd be a great person to work with from the school district perspective to get that information out to the student body.
You put together a pretty slick video that I'm sure the department's giving them the business on.
Appropriately so.
But, you know, our new SRO, just as all of them have always been tremendous coming in. I don't know if Asha and Andrew want to talk about Foster, Detective Berrigan, Officer Berrigan at all, but he's been a great addition.
Yes, he's bringing his guitar around, and I see high schoolers and middle schoolers playing guitar with him, which is always an awesome community thing. And he helped out with our parade, and the entire city helped out with the parade, which I know the district is thankful for. So Katie and Alex and Scott, the district did an amazing job. But it's been awesome. And Officer Detective Berrigan has done an awesome job. So it's nice seeing him involving with the students and really caring to learn about their names and their needs and strengths.
Yeah, and I agree with Andrew, like, to have him connect with students, it means a lot to certain kids.
Is that video up yet or out yet?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
We'll get it out there some more for him then.
Yeah. I know that the district does, and I haven't seen it, so. Anyone else with questions, thoughts, anything on transportation?
I guess on the electric buses, I presume that the calculus on when to leap on this is not just based on the acquisition price, but on the total cost of ownership. You mentioned the infrastructure. I presume also the operating costs are lower for an electric vehicle than they are for diesel. So I trust that's part of the calculus, right?
That's definitely part of the calculations that we've been doing, but the maintenance thing is nothing to scoff at, right? Because if we had like 2 buses break down and no one to fix them, or we had to wait, 4 months to get them fixed, that would be a significant hit to the district. So that's part of it too.
Sure.
How's transportation going at the high school? Do you think kids are able to get to and from high school, or are most people just driving independently? Sorry.
Well, the easy answer would be build more roads around the high school, but I know we can't build more roads around the high school.
Yeah.
I and Asha can't speak to the buses, but for high school, there's always a lot of traffic, as there is whenever school gets out, because our big lot, our C lot over there, everyone tries to leave and everyone tries to go in, and then parents are stuck waiting there trying to turn in. So you get about 10 to 12 minutes sometimes of really bad traffic. Usually it's not that bad, but it's just, unless we can build a bigger parking's an issue, but we can't build a bigger parking garage, we can't build more roads. But within 10 minutes, it's usually, everyone's pretty out of there, but it can get congested by when school ends at high school.
Yeah, and I've been working on a strip this year, Andrew has not. And it's honestly, it's been a lot less crowded than past years, so I think students are they're being more creative with carpooling. I found that traffic's been less bad this year, even strip too.
The high school, I don't know if everyone knows, they did permits a little bit differently this year, and there's you get priority parking, the best parking if you register as a carpool, so 3 or more families, I think it is.
Yes.
And that's, the front lot, so prime spot. And then, and so I'm sure that that's helped. And then also, not assigning C lots so that as students come and go, which we know they do, their spots aren't sitting empty all day. If they've got running starter or, whatever else it is that they're doing. I think also I should just wait until you move through the school year as the sophomores are getting their licenses, and that's when you kind of really start to see this trip be a problem. But I think that's also one of the considerations with the facilities master plan, is making sure that parking is taken into account, and it's what.
When you park the garage out, Andrew said,
Yeah.
he's gonna find it.
Right. I think it's, as one of the parents who sits in that line sometimes and then watches kids in and out, I think it's just, whether it's continuous reminders to both students and parents, it really is 10 minutes a day, well, probably morning and afternoon. Come with your patience, and if you have, somewhere to be, then plan accordingly. But, it's hard to justify, huge changes to infrastructure when it's literally 10 minutes a day. So as long as everyone's hopefully following the guidelines, which doesn't happen, then that certainly helps, and it's just come with your patience on, and we get through the 10 minutes, just like the elementary schools do it too.
Did we maybe lose a council member on Zoom, or is it just not showing?
Well, Wendy may be off video.
Okay. Okay. Items to note, interlocals.
City manager and myself have been talking, but mainly amongst the staff, really working through our interlocals. And one of the projects that we've really taken on this year, now that kind of coming out of the pandemic, is looking at all the interlocals kind of over time and realizing that some we never officially took offline, they just existed. So we've been really cleaning those up, and I think it's gone really well between our staff, our two staffs. And so at this point, there aren't any major issues with any of the interlocals. They're all, I think, working through. We're just making adjustments and adapting to the times. So Tony, you oversee, or you work a lot with their team on that.
We've, I think back in September, Director Sullivan came on board as our new CFO, and just this week we spent some time going through with the help of Jason and his staff, getting us the most current copies and just trying to flush through them and see exactly what's there, what needs to be addressed first, which ones we can kind of, continue to ride for a while, but we are definitely making some headway. And I think we've been talking about South Mercer for some time, but we were waiting for this project to get down the road a little bit to see really what that was gonna look like in the end. So we are definitely making some headway on that, so.
And I know the city won't have to mow there anymore, but it's.
No, they still, a little bit.
Little bit?
There's still.
There's still road grass,
About
okay.
30%, 40% of the
Oh,
grass is
okay.
still there.
Yeah, okay.
Well, if you can call it grass. Just winter, no winter mud, winter mud pits.
Okay. Legislative priorities, Dan, you wanna share the?
Yeah, so the big one from the school district's perspective, but really for the community, is a week and a half ago, OSPI, the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Reichnall, had a proposal to change the regionalization rate. To sort of back up for a moment and sort of set the landscape. 4 years ago, there was the McCleary decision where the state Supreme Court said the state had to adequately fund public education under the state constitution. As part of it, there was a levy swap. So there was a limitation on the amount that local school districts could ask for when it came to their maintenance and operation levy. So it was capped at $2,500 per student adjusted for inflation. So this year, we're able to collect $2,742 per student. In exchange, property taxes increased dramatically, 38.5%, which goes to the state general fund for education, and then is redistributed out to local school districts. So there was a reduction in terms of local funding, an increase in state funding. At a high level, the basic formula for what districts receive is a simple calculation of their enrollment multiplied by a regionalization factor, which reflects the different cost of living in our state, which is significant. The median home price in Mercer Island is obviously much different than in other areas of the state with a lower cost of living, and as a result, it's harder to retain teachers to provide a living wage for them to live, not even in the communities, but just within commuting distance of the school districts. So fast forward to a couple weeks ago, OSPI's proposal was to reduce the maximum regionalization rate from 18% to 12%. The impact that it would have on the Mercer Island School District would be $2.5 million less per year, about a 5% reduction in state funding, which accounts for over 60% of the funds that we operate on an annual basis. And school districts run on very thin margins. When thinking about rebuilding our general fund balance to an 8 to 10% level, that's a multi-year plan. So a 5% reduction in state funding would equate to about a 3% overall reduction in funding, which would be very difficult. It is significant impact in terms of staff, counseling services where we have common interest, Mercer Island Youth and Family Services. Also a big impact for our community. We pay 38.5% of property taxes go to the state general fund, but we'd be receiving less as a result. And it would put pressure, I think, for the horse trading perhaps to come to allow districts to increase the amount that they could tax themselves, because they would be receiving, in higher cost of living areas like Mercer Island, because they'd be receiving less from the state. So that's a huge issue. I think regionally, the total over 4 years is over $1 billion. So it's a profound impact. It will be voted on by state legislators in this session. They have to pass the budget and fund and take into account what if there should be any adjustment in the regionalization factor. Common sense and data is that the deal that was negotiated 4 years ago, nothing has changed about the facts in the intervening 4 years that would justify a reduction in the regionalization rate. Cost of living has only increased proportionally in metropolitan areas. And in a district like Mercer Island, it's already difficult because we have the highest cost of living within the region. So a teacher in Everett they get the same pay scale, actually for historical reasons, a little bit more. The regionalization factor is 1.2 in Everett. We get 1.18. So if you look at teacher retention rates, it's lowest in the highest cost of living areas within the same regionalization factor. As a school board, we have voted to, draft a letter to persuade state legislators that this defies common sense and economic reality, and that it's a loss that our school district cannot afford. We will close out the year with a negative general fund balance. We're already struggling under the deal that was struck post-McCleary because it doesn't recognize the cost of living differences throughout the state. And this would be putting us in an even worse position. So hopefully other districts in the area recognize the importance of this and the devastating effect it would have if the proposal came to fruition and was passed by the state legislature.
Well, that's a great update, a little sobering update. We talked about it very briefly in council member reports Tuesday night. I told the council that you and I had talked, that the school board had authorized a letter to be drafted. Our intention is, if you have that letter ready in time, to bring it back to council on November 15th to vote and sign on to that letter to support it. Once we support a legislative ask like that, we can use our legislative processes and resources to help support it. I don't know where they would vote on that, if it's within the context of a budget or if it has its own McCleary voting kind of mechanism, but we have folks who can figure that out and we can talk to the right folks and try to push that in the right direction. But certainly we don't want to see a $10 million loss over 4 years, and I'm taking it from your $1 billion loss over 4 years. This is every 4 years they vote on this. It's a bad decision is something we're married to for 4 years.
Precisely, and the other thing for context is because this is the first time post-McCleary, there is no precedent. And so I think that other districts see this as perhaps an opportunity to renegotiate the deal that was struck 4 years ago, even though, again, the facts haven't changed. And there's nothing in Chris Reichdahl's proposal that justified changing the deal that was already agreed to after intense discussion and debate. So yeah, it would be a loss to the community. It's significant sums. So your support.
Do you want to mention that Palo Alto?
Yeah, the other thing for background, because we receive less federal funding than almost every district in the state, our median spend per student is actually less than the state average. It's 88%. If you look at a peer school like the Palo Alto School District in California, it's 162% of the median spend in California, which gives us, I think there's this presumption that Mercer Island is a wealthy school district, but if you look at the funds that we operate on, that's not the case. We receive less than average, despite having the highest cost of living. So again, it defies rationale and reason. And it would be damaging to the community if even more money is sucked away from our district, which needs it.
So Dan, two-part question here. One would be the first, when you say that that ratio was changed regionally, was that, or what can you define, I mean, I'm talking about around, like what's
So,
the?
yeah, so like the way that it's done currently, and it hasn't been changed, the proposal is to change it. That'll be decided at the end of the legislative session this April. The deal that was struck was that the highest cost of living factor is 18%. So our district is in the highest. That's calculated on a district by district basis. Under Chris Reichdahl's proposal, the maximum would be 12%, and it would be calculated on a county basis rather than a district basis.
And what was the rationale for that?
The rationale is purportedly teacher retention, and rural and less expensive areas say that it's harder to retain teachers there. If one looks at teacher experience, which is data that's collected by OSPI, the number of years that a teacher is taught, there's nominal difference statewide from higher cost of living areas to lower cost of living, and it's actually lowest, which suggests that retention is the biggest issue, for districts like ours that has the same regionalization rate, but is the highest cost of living. Because you can teach in Everett or Kent and receive the same amount of money, but the cost of living is less, and you're likely more close to a place where you can afford to buy a house.
Some of it has to do with trying to iron out like potential like competition between districts for teachers, I think. That's
purportedly the case, but it neglects that teachers need to be able to afford housing within commuting distance of the district in which they teach. So it's about retention, but it's really redistribution that doesn't take into account cost of living difference.
Or necessarily where teachers would want to teach.
I think it's conflating. I think it's an issue of conflating equity and equality that we've all been working on for years. If we want, right, I mean, everyone, frankly, the dream is that everyone can afford to live near where they work and purchase a home and do all those things, but we know our teachers can't do that here. But if they're making the same salary or even close to it, where cost of living is literally less than a half, if not lower, that's not equity. So it's a surprising recommendation. It's surprising and frustrating.
And it'll be necessary for the region to step up, because the state entities like WASDA are going to be agnostic, because it'll hurt some districts, but it'll help some districts. So all the state entities are going to stay out of any discussion of reallocating how money is spent. They'll weigh in saying that there should be more money overall, but in terms of the allocation, it'll be up to individual districts and regions to represent themselves.
I'm sure this is going to be a hot topic at the WASDA state conference that some of us are going to, but it won't be until after your meeting on the 17th.
The 15th.
Oh, sorry, the 15th. We have a meeting on the 10th, so that letter will probably come back just on the 10th. Did you want to add anything on this?
The only thing I would add is, our three representatives, Senator Wellman, Representative Sen, Representative Tai, have been great supporters of our school district. We're fortunate that Senator Wellman chairs the Senate Education Committee. We're hopeful that she can help us to possibly keep this even from seeing the floor. But there are certainly other representatives and senators who will see, as Director Williams was saying, who will see this as a win for their district, are going to push hard the other way. So while we have great support from our three reps, we're going to need more regionally to really help us out.
Including districts in King County that think we get too much. So.
That was an excellent update. I look forward to the letter, and we'll do what we can to get it back to you as quickly as possible.
Thank you so much. I'm wanting to end on time, but is there anyone who has anything on screen or off that they'd like to ask about or mention?
I want to make a quick offer because we had a study session to be introduced formally to our new judge, Judge Jeff Gregory, who's our Mercer Island municipal judge, only the second municipal judge Mercer Island has ever had. We tend to have very long tenures here. He comes from other areas of the region where he's done a lot of outreach, civics, mock trials, student engagement. He's very open to those types of things. In fact, he's already done some for districts outside of Mercer Island that he had relationships with. I know we get our share of high school students with civics assignments coming and supporting projects like more parking around the high school. But I want to make sure that the high school students knew that our judge is very open, and I'm sure that the civics credits that you're looking for would be applicable there, and you could do that with him and learn all about the municipal court and what it has to offer the community. It's just a really great asset.
You can talk to the paper, actually.
Could send us his email or his contact to Superintendent Rundle.
We will.
And
We'll
we'd
get
be
it
happy
to you.
to, yeah, work with that. That's awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn our linkage.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. That passes by a vote of 4-0 and 2-0 advisory. Thank you so much, everyone. I feel like this is a very efficient, productive meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
It's a complicated issue.
Well, then, the bigger.